I want to go through a quick fire question around things that fail you on a carnivore diet and then your perspective on it, because it's not failing, it's just changes that happen. So let's address blood glucose numbers. Do you have to chase a certain number, and what is the range that's good?
Well, I think that the considered normal range of human blood glucose ranges between 70 and 140 milligrams per deciliter, right? And typically people say fasting blood glucose but below 100. There's some people that say 83 is the optimal number. I don't know if that's true or not. I think that we also have to realize that a fasting blood glucose on carnivore might require a longer fast than another diet because meat sits in your stomach for a long time. I mean, it literally takes a long time to get to your digestive tract. And that's by design. It's like the same reason these GLP-1 drugs are having an effect. It slows down your gut because meat has an endogenous GLP effect, and it causes the gut to slow down for the purpose of it allows us to fully absorb that meat. And so you might still be absorbing nutrition 8, 10, 12, 14, 16 hours after a large meal. And so if you take a blood glucose 12 hours after you ate a big steak, you're not even fasting yet. You're still in this postprandial absorption state, post-absorptive state, or absorptive state rather. And so the blood glucose might not necessarily be as low as you might want it to be. So that's something to think about. So I think, obviously now that we have CGMs and some of these things, we can get a better idea, a better feel for what our blood glucose might be doing. Our hemoglobin A1C might not match necessarily with our blood glucose due to, the difference in red cell viability. Sometimes the red cells live longer than we expect them to because they're healthier. And that artificially elevates our hemoglobin A1C. I've seen that happen before. So I think that, clearly if your blood glucose is routinely above 150, 160, 170, 180, milligrams per deciliter, then that's problematic. And that indicates some level of insulin resistance, prediabetes, diabetes, or something along that line. But I think that normal range is not necessarily a problem. And some people are concerned that, I woke up this morning, my blood glucose is 102. And it used to be when I was on a strict keto diet, it was 85. And I don't know that's necessarily a bad thing given, and again, there's some caveats there. If you are losing weight, getting leaner, getting more muscle on you, and your blood glucose goes up 5 points, I think that's probably even a reasonable trade-off.
Okay, LDL cholesterol, you mentioned cholesterol, but LDL, that kind of increases. Is that a worry or a concern? For some people, it increases.
It can be. Yeah. I mean, it depending on how much it increases. I think that, we do think we have some reasons why it might increase, particularly for lean individuals, that are on low carb diet. We think that's consistent with something called a lipid energy model, which is just saying that your liver has to traffic more fat because there's not as much glucose available. And so that's how we feed our cells. And our cells will basically, they'll take our own body fat, they'll metabolize it, it'll be reprocessed in the liver and packaged into these so-called lipoproteins, of which LDL is one of them. And that is why we see that. Now the question becomes, is it problematic? And the answer to that is it depends, and we don't know for sure, but we do know that people that have imaging studies that have very low or very little plaque are less likely to be progressing with heart disease than those people that have high amounts of plaque. So if you've already got heart disease and you have LDL cholesterol, that potentially is a source of problems, and you might have to figure out strategies to deal with that.
What about kidney function? Increases in serum creatinine, which is a marker of kidney function on a carnivore diet. Is that a concern?
For the majority of people, it's not. Creatinine is a marker, really is a marker of protein turnover, is really what it is. That's what it's, really reflective. So someone who has a lot of muscle mass, like myself, someone who eats a lot of protein, someone who breaks down a lot of muscle, like someone who exercises a lot, those things are always going to result in a higher creatinine. And if that's the reason for that, then that's probably not a concern. Now, if you are small, don't have a lot of muscle mass, don't eat much protein, you're pretty sedentary, and you've got high creatinine, then that's probably a situation where that could be a problem and there could be an issue with your kidneys. Now, how do you distinguish between those two? If it's just a protein turnover issue, or if it's truly a kidney processing issue or filtration issue. There is a test called cystatin C, which will distinguish that. It's not dependent upon muscle mass or protein intake, and it gives you a truer estimate of the glomerular filtration rate, the GFR that we use to assess kidney function. Now, I mean, beyond that, you can directly measure that with things like inulin, and there's some other compounds that people use. But in general, when someone tells me their serum creatinine has gone up and therefore carnivore is not working for me, I would tell them you probably need to assess it better, because that may simply just mean you're just eating more protein and it's not a pathology.
Mm-hmm. Next one is I'm not in ketosis and I'm not measuring, I'm not like, I'm doing my blood work and then not getting, sorry, I'm drawing the blood, not getting those high ketone numbers. Do you have to have high ketone numbers to get good carnivore results?
No, absolutely not. I mean, you can you can certainly lose weight without being in ketosis. You can actually gain weight while being in ketosis. I mean, it's not necessarily the magic metric, and sometimes it's distracting. And you have to realize that the amount of ketones that you have in your blood, your urine, your breath, depending on how you measure it, are basically waste products, right? And so, when we get fat adapted, we want to utilize those ketones. So those ketones are something that we are actually using to fuel our cells, and particularly fueling our brain. And as we get more efficient at utilizing these ketones, they just don't hang around as much in the blood. So there's an amount that we produce, and there's an amount that we utilize, and whatever we don't use gets wasted, and so those show higher levels. So, but if we're using a lot of it, and we're very efficient at using it, that's why a lot of people, as they do a ketogenic diet for a long period of time, their ketones often drop. And so you have to do sort of unusual things to really bump them up, like fast for a long time, or restrict your food, or exercise extra hard, or really increase the fat content. Those are the things that can drive up the ketones. But it's not a prerequisite to get healthy on a carnivore diet. Carnivore diet often is ketogenic, but it's not always ketogenic. And I don't think it's required for many people. I rarely produce really high ketones given my typical pattern of eating and exercise and those types of things. Now, I certainly can. Like if I fast for a little bit longer, maybe increase the fat a little, I'll elicit more ketones. But does it make me any more healthy or make me lose or getting leaner? Not necessarily.
Do you need a diverse gut microbiome to be healthy?
I think healthy people have healthy microbiomes. I think that's the way we should look at things, and what that means is depending on the eye of the examiner. I mean, I think we look at it backwards. We have this perception of what a healthy diet is, Mediterranean diet, low fat, lots of fiber, a little bit of seafood, lots of cruciferous vegetables, whatever, whole grains. And we look at the people's microbiome that are consuming that diet, and we say, aha, that's the healthiest diet. Therefore, that's the healthiest microbiome. And it has a certain percentage of, bifido and lactobacillus and all, whatever's in there. I mean, there's gazillions of bacteria in there. I mean, but diversity is something that, believe it or not, a carnivore diet actually lends itself to significant diversity, at least in the amount that it's been studied. There was a recent study done out of Europe in Croatia, believe it or not, where they looked at, I think they did detailed microbiome analysis on about 35 people. And one of them was a 6-year carnivore. And the 6-year carnivore's diversity was in the top percentile of all the people. It was one of the more diverse microbiomes. And I've seen that over and over again, but I don't put as much stock in that. I just think that we should look at health in terms that are objectively clinically useful to us. How do I feel? How do I perform? How does my gut function? If I've got a diverse microbiome and it looks good on paper, but I'm bloated and in pain all the time, is that really a healthy gut? I would argue it's not. So I think we have to go back to first principles about what it means to be healthy. But having said that, I think that it's 2025. We've been talking about cholesterol since about 1908 or something like that. Since when they started sticking it in, feeding rabbits fat. This is a discussion on cholesterol. We are still debating that one singular molecule 120 years later. One molecule. The gut microbiome is composed of billions and billions and even trillions of individual microbes of different species that change every 15 minutes at times. The complexity is many orders of magnitude more complex than the interaction of cholesterol. So to presume that we can make proclamations and be prescriptive about gut microbiome is extremely, extremely, in my view, sort of almost arrogant to think that we can just say, hey, this is the right microbiome for you. I mean, sure, you can identify pathologies. You can say, hey, if you've got like a C. difficile infection, you've got this overgrowth of this really pathologic bacteria, yes, that's a problem. But to say that The only way you can be healthy is to have this specific microbiome pattern. I think it's premature. And I think we're going to find that. So I will just go back to my point. A healthy person, as defined by what I think most people would accept as healthy, will have a healthy microbiome.
Okay, last question for you. Is carnivore enough? Do you need things like electrolytes, salt, and iodine?
Well, is carnivore enough? And it depends what you mean by enough for what. Now, like I said, is it enough to cure every chronic disease? I would say, I think it is. I think nutrition is a fundamental aspect of that problem. But I do think it's an holistic approach. I think you need to be sleeping well. I think you need to be not sedentary. I think you need to get out in the sunshine and interact with the light appropriately. I think you need to be mitigating stress. And so I think it's a critical component of healing and health. Um, the question about electrolytes, yes or no. And this little container here had electrolytes in there. I drank it because I was working out. I think, in the transition phase, a lot of people find that electrolytes help them because there is a somewhat of a diuresis, as you will, like you just kind of, you kind of urinate off all your sodium in your water, a lot of it. And so that helps you to transition so you don't get the headaches and the cramps and some of the heart palpitations that sometimes occur with dehydration. And then I think if you are someone who, like me, who sweats a lot, I get out there and work out, I'm sweating and breathing hard and so blowing off all that respiratory vapor. I think the electrolytes are helpful because you lose them. So you want to replace them. As far as iodine is concerned or not, I mean, if someone has like a thyroid issue, there is some evidence that supplemental iodine can be beneficial. However, I should admit, I should tell people that too much supplemental iodine can actually be deleterious to the thyroid. So it's kind of one of those things where maybe a little bit might be helpful, but too much can actually have a negative effect on there. So, but I don't think routinely people need iodine. I don't think it's something that everybody needs to be taking drops of iodine every day to be healthy on carnivore. I'm kind of, I guess, one of these old-fashioned people that thinks that humans don't need supplements to be healthy and survive, primarily because they didn't really exist, 100 years ago. There was a few guys, snake oil guys selling some stuff. But I mean, for the most part, the population wasn't consuming supplements. And I would argue many of them did just fine without that. And I know there's these arguments that modern farming and agriculture has depleted our soils and on and on and on. But again, it's not really carnivore kind of sort of, if you're eating an inferior diet, then the supplementation makes a little bit more sense. Kind of like the argument around the fiber. If you're eating an inferior diet, then fiber makes sense. But if you're eating a diet that is rich in highly bioavailable protein and essential fats and vitamins and minerals, then I think the supplementation becomes less of an issue for most people.
To watch the full episode, just click here. And if you'd like to see more clips, make sure that you subscribe.